Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are going inside a collapse that maps can't explain, a breakdown that never looked dramatic on paper, but changed everything on the ground. When analysts later looked at charts, arrows, and shifting lines, they missed the most important part. The real collapse didn't happen on the map. It happened in systems, in decisions, and in moments of hesitation that no diagram could ever capture. At the start, everything appeared stable. Defensive lines were drawn clearly. Units were assigned sectors. Command believed the situation was under control. Reports suggested pressure, but nothing unusual for an active front. Yet beneath that appearance, small problems were already stacking up, unnoticed or ignored. Communication was the first weak link. Radios failed intermittently. Messages arrived late or not at all. Orders passed through multiple layers before reaching the front line, losing clarity at each step. What sounded decisive at headquarters became vague and confusing by the time it reached the soldiers who needed it most. As pressure increased, those small delays began to matter. Units waited for confirmation that never came. Others acted on outdated instructions. Some commanders made independent decisions, not because they wanted to, but because silence left them no choice. This was not chaos yet, but it was the foundation of it. Logistics quietly followed the same path. Supply routes that once felt routine became unpredictable. Fuel arrived late. Ammunition shipments were rerouted or stalled. Medical evacuations slowed. None of these failures alone caused collapse, but together they drained the system's ability to respond under stress. On the ground, soldiers sensed the shift before anyone else. They noticed gaps forming where support should have been. They felt longer stretches without resupply. They saw neighboring units reposition without explanation. These were not dramatic moments, but they planted doubt. Morale does not break suddenly, it erodes. Confidence weakens when soldiers feel unseen or unsupported. Trust fades when plans stop making sense. As uncertainty grows, every sound feels closer, every shadow more dangerous. This psychological pressure weighed heavily long before the front line visibly moved. Leadership faced an impossible dilemma: hold the line and risk encirclement, or pull back and risk collapse spreading. Decisions were made with partial information and under intense time pressure. Some choices were correct in isolation, but disastrous when combined with others made elsewhere. The enemy did not need overwhelming force. They needed timing. They probed weak points, not to break through immediately, but to test reactions. Each response revealed another vulnerability. Each hesitation opened space. The collapse was not forced. It was invited. Maps later showed gradual shifts, arrows bending backward, lines adjusting, but those visuals hide the reality. The real movement was internal. Units stopped functioning as a single body. Coordination fractured. Initiative disappeared. Defense became reaction. As the system strained, intelligence failed next. Observation posts were abandoned. Surveillance coverage thinned. Reports contradicted each other. Without reliable information, command operated in darkness. Decisions became guesses, and guesses became orders. Civilians near the front line felt the impact almost immediately. Checkpoints vanished, evacuation plans changed hourly, roads clogged with people trying to leave, not knowing which direction was safe. Infrastructure that once supported life now obstructed survival. Attempts to stabilize the situation followed quickly. Reserves were rushed forward. New defensive lines were drawn, but these efforts treated symptoms, not causes. You cannot restore cohesion with fresh troops alone. You cannot rebuild trust with new coordinates. Fatigue became a silent enemy. Soldiers who had been alert for days without rest reached physical and mental limits. Mistakes multiplied. Equipment failures increased. Reaction times slowed. In these conditions, even minor attacks felt overwhelming. As pressure mounted, blame spread. Some accused leadership of denial. Others blamed allies for delayed support. Internal divisions deepened. Energy that should have gone into recovery was spent on survival, defensiveness, and frustration. The collapse exposed long-standing weaknesses that had been masked by momentum. Training gaps became obvious. Doctrines built for different conditions failed. Overconfidence, once a strength, turned into rigidity. Reality punished assumptions. The enemy advanced carefully, not recklessly. They understood that overextension could reverse gains. Instead of racing forward, they secured key terrain, cut supply routes, and waited for the system to weaken further. Patience amplified success. On paper, nothing looked catastrophic yet. Frontline still existed. Units were still present. But functionally, the system was broken. The difference between presence and effectiveness became painfully clear. As days passed, the narrative shifted, objectives were scaled back, language changed from progress to containment. What was once about winning became about not losing too badly. This shift mattered more than any territorial change. Allies watched closely. Some increased support to prevent total failure. Others hesitated, recalculating risk. Perception shaped policy. A collapse that maps couldn't explain forced decisions far from the battlefield. For soldiers, the experience left lasting marks. Trust once lost is hard to regain. Even when positions stabilized, confidence did not fully return. Every order was questioned. Every movement felt temporary. The humanitarian cost continued to grow. Displacement increased. Medical systems struggled. Families searched for information that didn't exist. These consequences rarely appear in military analysis, but they define the real aftermath. Analysts later debated the moment of failure. Some pointed to a specific battle. Others blamed a single decision. But this search misses the truth. The collapse was not one moment. It was a process. It began when warnings were dismissed, when small failures were normalized, when adaptation slowed, when communication mattered less than appearance. By the time the line moved, the collapse had already happened. Maps simplify reality. They show movement, not meaning. They capture territory, not trust. They illustrate outcomes, not causes. That is why this collapse cannot be explained by lines alone. Understanding this matters because future conflicts will face the same risks. Technology cannot replace cohesion. Firepower cannot compensate for broken systems. And no map can warn you when confidence is about to fail. The lesson is uncomfortable. Strength on paper means little if internal systems cannot adapt under pressure. The most dangerous collapses are quiet. They look manageable until they are irreversible. What happened here was not just a frontline shifting. It was a system reaching its limit. It was a reminder that wars are not lost only through enemy action, but through accumulated neglect. As the conflict moved forward, strategies changed, priorities shifted, some ground was regained, some losses became permanent. But the memory of that collapse shaped every decision that followed. In the end, the most important change was invisible. It was the loss of certainty. Once gone, it never fully returned. Every plan carried doubt. Every move carried caution. This is why maps can't explain what happened, because the collapse lived between the lines, in the spaces no diagram can capture. And understanding those spaces is the only way to prevent the same outcome from happening again.